Okay, so I guess today we're going to find out exactly how badly time zone challenged Jim is. I spent last weekend with a group of friends at Wonderfest in Louisville, Kentucky, and have a photo I'll be and some discussion we'll talk about in a few minutes on that one. And I set this watch party up at that time, and of course it was in a different time zone. So normally I hold these watch parties at 4, which I thought, hey, that's probably what I'm going to be doing, only to find out that no, in fact, this one was actually set for 3 o'clock local time. So I started the watch party at 3 o'clock local time, then realized when I'm watching on my feed up here where I get to see what you guys see, that it said 4. So I had to kill that particular watch party and relaunch this one right after it. So I apologize for those of you who were confused. I apologize even more to the people who are going to join us at 4 o'clock wondering what in the heck is going on as we're wrapping up. But I think all things considered, one mistake is enough for today rather than trying to compound it by fixing it and going back to 4. So let me see. So we got a group of people on the line right now. Good afternoon. Glad to see everybody. I need to make sure I bring up the appropriate screen so as you guys start entering things in, I'll be able to actually follow along. Excuse me. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time today, we're going to take a look at the original Star Trek episode, The Squire of Gothos. I have a link right up to the top of the screen here that you'll be able to use in your browser should you choose to use it. Watch.trek-world.com. It will take you to Pluto, which will then allow you to watch this free episode of Star Trek. Pluto will ask you if you want to log in. You can click no and just continue on as a guest. And you can continue to watch it without having to actually be registered on Pluto. It is completely free service, but it is advertising supported. So you will see ads in the middle of this episode. If you wish to follow along with a different source, such as Paramount Plus, or any one of the international sources, I think it's still Netflix in some of the international areas, you're more than welcome to. For those of you who are up in the Great White North, Pluto exists, but the links are different. So I do not believe that Star Trek is actually available in the Canadian catalog up there. But most assuredly, the link that I send you won't actually work properly up there, and I apologize for that. Now, to compensate a little bit for that, when we begin the movie, and I usually start at like 15 minutes after the hour, I'm actually going to put it up on the screen, and this is exactly what you're going to see. Ta-da! So what's going to happen up here is I need to make sure that we keep Paramount happy. Don't want any lawsuits or any strikes on YouTube. So my special movie that I show on the channel as we talk changes a screenshot every 15 seconds of the episode. So we'll go through 200, 300 screenshot seconds. It'll automatically update on the screen, and in the bottom right-hand corner, it'll give you a timestamp. So if you are following along on some other source and you want to know exactly where we are in the episode, then that'll tell you right there. It's close. It's not perfect, obviously, so some of you might run into. So anyhow, that's what we're going to be doing in a few minutes. Let me go into my chat window because I know we got a few things here. You should host a watch party. Okay, Kerbal, we're going to come back to that in a minute. First off, good afternoon, everybody. Underdog, nice to see you again. Hope you get to feeling better. Let's see what else we got. So, Kerbal just brought up something pretty slick. You should host a watch party in virtual reality. I do not know how many people we have on this call today, so it would be really good after the call to leave in the comments whether or not you have access to virtual reality. Do you use an HTC Vive? Do you use a Valve Index? Do you use a Quest 2, a Quest 3, a Quest Pro? Do you use Apple Vision Pro? All of us might be envious of you. Do you have access to virtual reality? And as much as I hate to say it, the really strategic question is going to be: is do you have access to any of the Meta projects? So, Quest 2, Quest 3, the Quest Pro, because they provide the ability for us to hold virtual meetings in virtual rooms together. And I would love that idea, Kerbal. I think we could definitely come back here and do that. Let's see. He's also coming back and says, you can use big screen for those who don't have a headset, could still watch on their computers. Okay, cool. For those of you who follow the channel, keep an eye on the community tab over the next week or so. Hopefully I'll find some time to do maybe a trial. We won't necessarily do a watch party, but we'll see if we can actually get the live stream piece up and running within that virtual room like Kerbal's talking about. I am familiar with the big screen program on the PC, and yes, it is available through Meta, and I know it's available for the others as well. I've just never used it yet, so we're going to play with it and see what happens. I think it would be really, really neat to actually do that. Disclaimer, I just bought a Quest 3 to replace my Quest 2 this week and have just recently been playing on wandering around through the virtual reality rooms and seeing just how much has changed since I grew up, or since I was on it last, like 2 years ago. Manley says, dibs on the virtual captain's chair. Alexandria, so nice to meet you. If you are new here, welcome. Actually, I do have a good, Kerbal has a question. Good. I do have a good question. For those of you in general who are on, there's just a small amount of us now, I'm pretty sure, because of the fact that the time zone thing is there. But let me know if you are a Trek World newbie, if you've never actually attended one of our watch parties before, and then I'll go over that again, I guess, towards the time when we launch it in about another, 6 or 7 minutes. But make sure that I clue people in. So if it is your first time, then by all means, you are more than welcome. Thank you for joining us. Here at Trek World, the channel focuses primarily on what I refer to, and actually we coined the phrase Gen 1 for Star Trek. And it basically refers to folks that we remember, and our encounter with Star Trek was before the Next Generation, which means that our encounter with Star Trek was with a dead product. We didn't know it was coming back. So we went through, the valley of the shadow of death in the 1970s, waiting for, any possibility of a reprieve. We got it. And a whole new generation, literally, no pun intended, of fans joined us for Gen 2, which begins with Next Gen. So this particular channel focuses primarily on Gen 1, but you are going to see a growing number of Gen 2 things start to show up in the channel this year, because there are things from Gen 2 that I personally love. I'm very, very much fond. Very, very much fond. I don't speak much by myself, do I? I'm very fond of Deep Space Nine, and I was in the original run as well, and I was not in the majority at the time. There were a lot of negative Deep Space Nine Star Trek fans out there. But there's no denying that the Rick Berman area of Star Trek that began with Star Trek The Next Generation, picking up, of course, after Gene passed, to actually picked up before that when Gene was just having his health issues, and going all the way up to Enterprise. But the 1990s were the most successful, most profitable, and the most popular Star Trek ever. So we'll be doing some more information from Gen 2. We still have a lot more to do from Gen 1, but we'll probably see some new faces appear as we spread out to the next generation, folks. What we got? Flavio, thank you. So glad that you decided to join us today. And thanks for checking out the videos. The videos right now, they've been coming out like a 3 a week. I think I'm going to probably have to slow them down to 2 a week just to be able to keep my sanity starting next week. But you'll see several series that we're running right now. We've got a series on, of course, the bloopers. I hate to use the word bloopers, but bloopers works best in the title because it's not just bloopers. But we'll take a look at the things that were either perceived as bloopers, incorrectly or not. Things that just require talking. Maybe there were continuity issues. Why did Spock behave more emotionally in the menagerie than he did in the Corbomite maneuver? Things of that nature. as well as just some, I don't know, overall thoughts on the structure of those particular episodes. The videos run about 10 minutes each, between 7 and 10 minutes. They're not really, really deep. But they concentrate on just those exception things. And nobody's really done the around the world type of approach on a per episode basis like that, and release them one right after the other. So please join us with that. We also have a series of creatives coming up, which will have new features and new subjects. Alexandria, Trek World newbie, fan of Trek since 2020 pandemic, 22 and currently went cosplaying as female Spock at the Phoenix Fan Fusion. If you get a chance, Alexandria, go ahead and drop us a line at jim@trekworld.net. We'd love to put photographs up of you in the community channel. I'm not aware of anyone on our channel that has actually participated actively in cosplay in recent years. A lot of us were involved in it, back in the Stone Age, before cable TV. But in recent years, we don't see it as much. And I've always been endlessly fascinated by it. And make no bones about it, it's a far more advanced form of art than it was back then. Some of the folks that I do see when we go to local conventions and stuff from time to time are true artists, very much right up there with our model building community. We are approaching about 3 minutes to when we're getting ready to start. I do want to point out for our overall audience that we met at Wonderfest this year. It was the first event that Trek World visited. These 4 gentlemen that you see on the screen, 3 gentlemen and 1 tag along with me over there on the left, are key patrons for Trek World, not just on YouTube, but Patreon and some other places. But the point is this. This picture was the largest of us that we got together at one time. We also met with a couple other people who have been patrons and followed with us. And we're hoping that each individual year after this, the picture just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I personally had a wonderful time. Can't tell you how much I enjoyed myself. It was my first event, ladies and gentlemen, since the 1970s, early 80s, I think, early and mid 80s. And I'm delighted to report that Wonderfest, which is about the behind-the-scenes production involving model making and sculpturing and artistry, okay? No, very few, if any, movie or TV stars here at these conventions. Mostly behind-the-scenes people, extraordinarily talented people. People still involved very much today in Star Trek even, are there. It meets every year in June in Louisville, Kentucky. And I can honestly tell you, it was like walking back 40, 50 years. The fan experience at that particular gathering is exactly the way we remember it back in the 1970s and earliest days of Star Trek fandom. So I was overjoyed at that. Our next con appearance is going to be at Trek to Nashville in September, I believe, when Creation is bringing its traveling version of the Star Trek Vegas convention to town. It'll be the first Creation convention I've attended probably in about 30-some years. It's going to be a different environment. It is all, what's what I'm looking for? It's all profit. It's all license. It's all slick. And don't get me wrong, it keeps the lights on, and I'm tickled to death for it. We probably get a much greater visibility to at least the stars and guest stars than we ever would have gotten using another model other than the model that Creation pretty much pioneered. Let me see what we got here. So I'm going to go ahead and make that go down a little bit. And I didn't like the idea of DS9 before it aired, but after I watched it, I liked it. Very similar, Kerbal. I watch all the Star Treks, the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, and I have my opinions on all the Star Treks, as we all do. I really didn't expect I did not expect Deep Space Nine to really catch on with me the way that it did. But well before the end of the first season, we actually began to start to see the interpersonal relationships. Ben Sisko as a father, the fact that Miles and Julian hated each other, some of these dynamics, the whole thing between Quark and Odo really, really sucked me in because we'd never experienced that in a Star Trek before, especially some of the more adversarial. 2 of the 3 relationships I just mentioned were highly adversarial, and that was never allowed under Gene. So yeah, it grew on me. Let's see what we got. Alexandria, I still welcome. Everyone's still lovely each other. I've heard some friends being rather crazy. It's been very long. I love them. Yeah, we do have some crazy fans. I have to admit it. We have some crazy fans, and like any other grouping of passionate people, sometimes people get out of control and out of hand. But I can honestly tell you that it seems to happen less in the Star Trek community, at least the community I have here on YouTube, than it does in other areas of the internet on forums and stuff. There's nowhere near as much of the toxicity, and everybody's been absolutely wonderful to me for the past couple of years. Okay, so we're going to go get ready to start this countdown, or start the video here. And this is, as everybody knows, Squire of Gothos. Like I said, right above here, right at the top, you see watchtrek-world-world.com. Go ahead and key that in. It'll bring up the video for you. I'm clicking start. This will give us some idea of what we're watching. However, like I said, every 15 seconds, the screens can update. So for those of you who literally don't want to open a second device or a second screen to follow along with the episode in our discussion, we can follow along this way. It is inelegant, but it does the job quite admirably, I think. All right, I'm going to continue down and make sure I'm not missing anybody in the comments here. Tell me again where you can post pics. You can send them to me at jim@trek-world.com, and I will post them up on the Trek World community page. You can post pics on our Facebook page. And you can find the Facebook page at, obviously, the easiest way to find it is facebook.trek-world.com. I believe you'll begin to see the pattern that I've established here. Our Pinterest site is pinterest.trek-world.com, TikTok.trek-world.com. And I really got to speak to that for a minute. TikTok has really, really surprised me. It is evolving as our second largest platform, which may not sound like much. I mean, we're still fairly small as channels go, with 17,000 subscribers. TikTok is going to be the first platform to exceed 1,000 subscribers, probably within the next few days, next week. As a result of that, you may start to see some of our longer form content on TikTok. Right now, TikTok is limited, as is Instagram and some of the other feeds, specifically to just our shorts, the 1 minute, shorts, which actually come from Trek World Shorts, a different channel. That way, if you don't like shorts, you don't subscribe to Trek World Shorts, you won't be buried with the number of shorts that we produce. The shorts are all clips, approximately 30 seconds to a minute long, of these episodes. That's a really nice picture of Nichelle, isn't it? I mean, the coloring is absolutely amazing. We can forgive the 1960s era, coffee cup. One of the things that impresses me most about Star Trek, the original series, than any other Star Trek series to date, is the artistry that is present in the cinematography, in the lighting, the pageantry of producing a TV show. It just seems to be almost romanticized to me when I watch an original episode of Star Trek versus the newer ones where the film media was different. The original series was shot on film. Next Gen and forward, was shot on film, transferred to digital video. So it's a slightly different medium. What else we got? You've got to come up to Taiwan, Danielle. I'm going to make it someday. I know I'm going to make it someday. I got a couple close. Some of my patrons have been there. A couple close acquaintances I haven't been there, and I turn green with envy every time they show me their pictures or whatever. I can't imagine what it's like, especially on a Shatner weekend or on a weekend where you've got some of the production people there, to be part of an interactive audience of more than no more than 20, 30 people, a fairly small audience. So the degree of one-to-one sounds incredible. I would absolutely love to see it. It's one of the things on my bucket list. Hopefully, I'll get to it without waiting a whole lot longer. Tried watching New Trek, just makes me angry. Kerbal, I understand. Absolutely different people have reacted very differently to New Trek, and I understand completely like that. Alexander says, I like some things, but doesn't feel the same as the old shows. I try to be positive, not sound overtly critical. That's just how I feel. Alexander, you're not alone. You mirror my belief. It's just an unusual photo there. You mirror my belief pretty much the same. I watch them all. Like I said, good, bad, the ugly. I try not to be overly critical because I don't want to foster the toxicity that can come up. So I very rarely get into specifics. I can tell you that of the newest shows of the Kurtzman era, beginning with Star Trek IX, because Kurtzman was one of the producers in Abrams' movie. Going forward, the shows I've enjoyed the most have been Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks. Neither one being what you would consider to be classic Star Trek, but I think does a really good job. Lower Decks, in particular, a really good job of paying fan service as well as appealing to the very young generation that does like the kind of messaging and the kind of storytelling that's done by newer versions of drama, science fiction drama these years. Underdog says we had a certain feel between the lighting, camera angles, close-up music. Never been absolutely 100%. The whole production of the original show was very, very orchestrated. Greetings and salutations. I like the screenshot there. It's funny that this is one of the remastered versions, but it is not the remastered with CGI. It's from the DVDs that came out in 98, 99, where they'd done the first restoration, which is why everybody looks so, the imagery looks so crisp and brilliant and colorful. But of course, when they did it, a lot of the optics, like the photograph that was up there, greetings, salutations, still were left. I mean, you cleaned up the film, but it's still very much 1960s graphics or lack thereof. TOS reflects the greatest filmmaking practices of the 60s. So if you love Trek, you will also love 60s epic movies. Absolutely. I actually have, Manly, I have another channel, and I think you probably heard me talk of it before. This is my primary channel. It's like 99% of my time. And then in some downtime, I try to take care of this other channel. But it's a passion that I have about that time frame. The channel is called Made for TV. And right now, the videos on it over the past year or so have been videos about that classic era of television. Whether it is, Dark Shadows or Kolchak the Night Stalker, or even more so, the incredible made-for-TV movies in the 70s. Things like Trilogy of Terror, Gargoyles, Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. There was such an artistry to that was different than anything else that had been done before it. And the reason's very clear. It was produced by television people and not movie people. Movies became so expensive that the networks realized in the 1960s that they actually already had standing sets, directors, writers, producers, actors. They had all this group of people that were much less expensive than a Hollywood's blockbusters when they would film things like The Sound of Music. So CBS, I believe, started it first, but they all came up with the concept of the movie of the week, and they started cranking out these 90-minute movies that really stretched the boundaries of television production at the time. And their design language, the way they look and feel, very unique to that period, and absolutely astounding. I absolutely love them, and they're fed off of what Manley just mentioned. Excuse me. 1960s made interest Star Trek in general. In the 60s in general, I love the aesthetic. Yeah, a sister show to Star Trek was Mission Impossible. And to the point that, Leonard Nimoy transitioned to Mission Impossible after Star Trek was over. And that has to be released early because he found it somewhat boring. Because, of course, his character spent most of his time under the, supposedly in disguise, which meant that Leonard wasn't really filming as much in front of the camera as he would have liked. And he had some other projects that he wanted to continue with. He was getting very quickly to head into Equus as a stage play. But if you're looking for a look and feel of the 1960s, Mission Impossible does a really, really good job of also demonstrating that look and feel from a it's fiction, but it shows it from like a practical effect and not a romanticized effect. So while Mission Impossible, Star Trek, and Andy Griffith all filmed on the same 40 acres backlot set using the same bat buildings and stuff like that, they had very, very different looks and feel that were very specific to the 1960s, I believe. Kerbal, yeah, I have the non-CGI versions. I figured if I want to watch CGI versions, grab the Blu-rays off the shelf, but I never have. Yeah, I ripped Kerbal. I have the same thing. My Plex server, I have both the new and the old. I generally are the CGI and non-CGI. I generally watch the non-CGI because most of what I try to focus on the channel here, especially with the in-depth videos that I try to do each week, a lot of the things that I might find or comment about on the original editions may have been corrected or edited out when they did the remasters. When the remasters came out, I was pretty pleased, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it was almost 20 years ago, literally 20 years ago. So I think they could have done a lot worse. It's just that its age is dated. They brought it out at a time when CGI was literally in what we would today consider its infancy. Anything that we look at that comes from that time frame, we look at as being extremely crude now. And Star Trek is it's a casualty of that. Now, ironically, and I've never heard anybody actually say this, I never had the opportunity to talk to Darren Dockerman, so what his take on this is. But since they've already done a complete remaster, restore, cleaning, and everything else, I would bet that it would be fairly easy for Paramount or CBS or Skydance or whoever they want to call themselves today to commission new CGI insert footage and just literally just relayer it with the new CGI, replacing the old CGI. We've seen it done a dozen million times by George Lucas, but it would be a staggering improvement in quality today because of the 20-year gap. But would it generate more income? Probably not. And if it doesn't generate more income beyond that of the curious, then as a company, they need to spend their money on what's going to generate income. Hopefully that's good new Trek. Or if they can't do that, we have plenty of other outstanding properties on the books today. The Boys, exceptionally violent, exceptionally gory, exceptionally just poor taste, but popcorn for the eyes. I can't get over The Boys. From on MGM's network, if you've never seen From, absolutely amazing. Apple TV gives us Foundation, based fairly loosely. They had to take in a lot of creative license with Foundation, but for those of us who've read Foundation series, especially beyond the original trilogy, you've got to take creative license with it, otherwise you're never going to make the movies. So there are some good television properties that are out there today that are doing something new and different than what's been done before. So hopefully we'll start to see familiarity beginning to break down, so we're not watching the same crap over and over again. It was such a different. Underdog has nailed it with that statement, has he? Such a different time with the look and feel of the internet. It's yeah, the internet and cable TV changed everything for us. Manley says, I love films. So many of my favorite actors pop up in them, especially William Shatner. Yeah. Alexandria says she wishes when TV was treated as an art. Absolutely. It hasn't been treated that way in forever. I love Nimoy's character on Mission Impossible, but I do remember reading in I Am Spock that it was rather boring for him. It was the same premise. Yeah, I remember reading that too. When you mention it, it immediately pops back out to me. I was just looking at the spine of I Am Spock earlier this afternoon as I'm getting ready to record the next series of videos on nonfiction books from the 70s, 80s, and beyond. And that's probably the first place that I encountered that. But I know he got into it and he got disappointed with it fairly quickly, and it wasn't challenging enough. So yeah, I can imagine it can be really, especially viewing his circumstance. If his face had been more recognizably, like when they would have Shatner don in a disguise in Barbary Coast, it was still recognizably Shatner under makeup appliances and stuff. With Mission Impossible, the duplication of the victims, for lack of a better word, was so skilled in the storyline that basically that just meant that the guest star that was portraying the victim portrayed Spock or Nimoy as the victim as well, effectively making him a secondary on the show. ZX, so nice to meet you here. Yeah, he has a tree lane. A lot of Star Trek fans have postulated, including myself, that tree lane might actually be a Q. And I'm curious to hear what everybody else thinks. And again, this will show it mostly in the comments after the fact, because we get quite a few people who do watch the watch parties after the fact. I'd be curious as to anything that anybody might have caught up on that believes that would preclude Q or preclude Trey Lane from being a juvenile Q. Because I've thought for a long time that you probably could get away with saying that they were a member of the same species. And I'm just curious, having never given it critical subject research, I'm just curious if anybody has any ideas of things that might preclude that from being the case. That's just an FYI stuff. That way that TV became a profitable business, not much room for creative risk these days. Absolutely. Their duty is to their shareholders, and I even agree with that. Their duty is to the shareholders. So if it's going to generate money, that's what they need to focus on. And that's one of the reasons why I have gotten so fond of the fact that streaming media gives us freedom to experience some shows that do not make sense on network television anymore. Network television is, in my opinion, a dying breed. I think 10 years from now, you won't be really thinking collectively of NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox. You'll be thinking of, Fox Now, Peacock, Paramount Plus, Disney. I guess I'm not sure Disney does the ABC stuff. So yeah, the identity of the broadcasters are going away, and we're focusing on the identity of the content. And that, I think, is going to be it has been liberating for us, because there are limitations that are involved in broadcast TV, and unfortunately, that means that broadcast TV is not likely to get a substantial improvement in its quality. It's just not worth putting the additional money in. The Boys is too brilliant satire. Absolutely, I agree with that wholeheartedly. It's actually produced by the people who did Supernatural, of all things. Hence Bobby Singer, Robert Singer being all the way through it, both the actor that played him and the character name, the whole 9 yards. My favorite TOS episode is Amok Time. When I first watched Star Trek, I would put on the background noise when I did homework, occasionally watching a few minutes and gathering context clues. Now, I never did that, but I did. But several of us growing up in Gen 1, our first recordings of Star Trek were on cassette. VHS and Beta were just beginning to show up in our homes, and a lot of us couldn't afford it. So we'd sit there, with a little cassette recorder and a little handheld mic right in front of a speaker and record Star Trek and listen back to it. And I do remember listening to a tape of The Trouble with Tribbles over and over again. And I picked up, Alexandria, I picked up something even at a very young age at that point, that the Star Trek episodes, when you listen to them this way, they're very, very reminiscent of the golden age of radio. You can actually follow, for the most part, a Star Trek episode completely via its audio only, and still get the story value and the performance value out of it, like an audiobook today. Now, obviously, if you're going to make an audiobook, you would do more than just simply listen to the people talking. So there'd be some other background information in it. But for the most part, it's remarkable that even today you can load up Star Trek on CBS, minimize it, and just listen to it, and do exactly what you mentioned, for the background cues and stuff. It's pretty amazing that it still does that after all these years. And I do that all the time, by the way, Alexandria. Every night while I'm doing research or I'm editing and stuff like that, I put on a movie on my big screen, my projector screen, and I put that movie on for, quote, noise, unquote. I don't want a quiet room because quiet bugs me. A little tiny bit of tinnitus, not enough to be painful or a pain in the butt, but completely silent. And then suddenly that seems to be the only thing I can hear and distracting. So I'll leave a TV thing on. And that's generally when I tend to put things like the made-for-TV movies, Kolchak, The Night Stalker, something from those earlier times, because I find that just listening to that sound subconsciously gives me comfort. Might just be because of my age. Your dog, good afternoon. You should host a watch party. Okay, we've been there. Oh, look at that. Mine, I think, just repeated itself. That or I hit the wrong button and went to the top of it. So hold on, I'm trying to get down here where we are. There we go. Alexandria goes on to say Spock grew to be my favorite character for his cool and calm ways, and then he's suddenly angry and agitated. I was at full attention. Spock's smile, I think. There's something else I want to bring attention to Alexandria too. If you go out and you search on the internet, and I actually have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of photos that I'm in the process of cataloging on Pinterest. So if you go out to pinterest.trek-world.com, you'll see a bunch of them out there, but they represent a very, very small amount of what I actually have. But one of the things that I've noticed when I'm collecting photographs of the actors behind the scenes or in the scenes, but especially behind the scenes, for things they did outside of Star Trek or whatever, Leonard Nimoy had one of the most engaging smiles of somebody that I have ever seen. There's something about seeing a photograph of Nimoy without his Spock makeup, being Nimoy, and if he's smiling, and he quite often did, it brings a smile to your face. It's just something about Nimoy. And for those of you who haven't actually made that connection, you can probably experience that connection in less than 4 or 5 minutes on Google. It's quite astounding, really. I guess it's that dichotomy. We're supposed to think of him as being emotionless or not. Manley just brought that up about William Campbell. William Campbell's portrayal of Trilene in this episode is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's bold. It's unapologetic is what I'm looking for. Trilene was he was just a butt wipe. He acted, when we found out, like a little kid throwing a temper tantrum. And so in order for the character to work, Campbell really had to turn it up to like an 11 or 12. He had to amplify all of these, look at that photograph with that smile from Campbell. Also seems like we caught him looking at the camera. That does not happen often. We did. They caught him looking square into the camera. But in order to play that character, you've got to crank it all the way up. And he cranked it all the way up, and he stayed believable, and he stayed interactive with Shatner, who, if you crank up your performance, Shatner will automatically crank his up. Good, bad, indifferent, does not matter. He is a volume for volume actor. Maybe he didn't want to be upstaged. Maybe he didn't want to compare unfavorably. But the result was when people stepped up their game, he stepped up his. And so I think some of the very best interactions, emotional interactions with Kirk in this subject or in this movie, I absolutely love it. And I can't remember, I can't forget Tree Lang's line, "Are you challenging me to a duel?" Yeah, after all these years, still right there. William Campbell, God bless him. Space age spoiled brat, absolutely. So you're then going to paying attention to the show because treating it as background noise and felt madly in love with the series. When it was over, it's hard to me move on to other shows. Yeah, whenever I find a new show and I consume it via binge watching, it's definitely melancholy after that last episode, isn't it? I mean, you want to go back and just start it all over again, but you can only do the first of something once. So going back and doing it all over again, it's still good. You still like it. You'll still pick up things that you missed, but it's still a copy. It's a step down against your original emotional satisfaction. So whenever I see a series end, and I realize that I got to go find a different subject or a different series to watch, I always get that little bit of melancholy. Tree Lang was confirmed by the writers as being Q. Okay, fascinating. Which makes me wonder, I guess the comment would have to come from the writers of Next Gen. They based Tree Lang off of, or they based Q off of the race that Tree Lang was. And I know they've had to have been asked that a dozen times or more. So that's fascinating. I've always believed it one way or the other. The Dome. Yeah, I remember the Dome was actually pretty good. Under the Dome, I think was the name of the book. Yeah, I like the theory. Randall brings up a good point. We don't have to shoehorn Tree Lang. It's okay for him to be any other type of creature. Um, so it's more of a what's the word I'm looking for? Um, a journalist fantasy. Oh, a fishing expedition. We're just trying to look that. Hadn't read Stephen King, but now I might. I do have to give you a little bit of word of warning, Alexandria and Stephen King. One, I love his work. I read it all the time. Stephen King exists in two periods in his life: before his accident and after his accident. And you're young enough, Alexandria, that you may not even understand what I'm referring to. But Stephen King was involved in an accident at his home state of Maine 30 years ago, roughly, where he almost died. He was hit while walking along the side of the road in iced out conditions. And in recovery from that, he detoxed completely from drugs and alcohol. And so Stephen King, prior to the accident, he felt he had to be under the influence to generate the kind of evil that he generated, like Pet Sematary and The Stand, and some of the early classic, real solid state evil that Stephen King was known for. His literature after Recover, definitely very different. Still a master at writing. But anyone who's read Under the Dome or Apartment 408 or Cell or any of the magnificent Gunslinger books, of which there are 7 tomes that are immensely, like 600, 700 pages each, can tell you he is a master at the craft of writing, and his books are extraordinary. But it helps if you determine which version of Stephen King you want to introduce yourself to first, because he's an expository writer. The first time you read a Stephen King book, he might spend a chapter or two, literal pages and pages, introducing you to a transient character that does not serve a purpose other than to begin to build the reality of the world he's introducing you to. He does this unmercifully in The Stand. And like my wife, loves Stephen King movies. She's read a couple of his books and likes some of them. She does not like the post-accident Stephen King. She can read Salem's Lot. She can read The Stand, Pet Cemetery, but she can't read Gunslinger. She just doesn't like that. So I put a little bit of conscious effort into what kind of entertainment you like, more supernatural or more melodramatic, suspenseful, thrilling, with a little bit of supernatural in there, and pick from those 2 pools. It just makes your Stephen King a little bit better. I know that's like really, really off topic for Star Trek. Sorry about that. Underdog says, used to listen to Doomsday Machine on Kmart cassette while it's building one of the many AMT Enterprise kits back in the 70s. It's always needed the TV or music on it all too. Yeah, same here, yeah. Alexandria actually found us through Pinterest. I am so happy to hear that, because as far as I know, nobody actually has ever communicated that to me yet. And maybe, Alexandria, I'll start working a little harder on it, because I could spend a weekend and probably continue to catalog and bring, hundreds and hundreds of pictures on a regular basis. But I've somewhat wondered whether or not Pinterest was a failed investment on my part. So the fact that even if it finds one person and brings it to us in our nice little fandom group here, means I need to refocus on it the same way I mentioned TikTok earlier, as it's brought people in as well. I have to give some thought to how to engage, what to give those people that they value. So I'm tickled to hear that, Alexandria. That's amazing. Manly says there's also an episode of the Transformers 1985 second season, which Shailene with Land of the Giants. I loved Land of the Giants as a kid. ZX. I was going to put a trailing costume together for cosplay, but already had 4 other outfits and other bills to handle. Isn't that just the story of our life? Manly, you're right. You're right. Of course, you're right. Manly is one of our resident experts on all things, especially if they happen to be also tangentially connected to Elvis. And I had forgotten that. I do remember that he was there because he was married to Michael Bay's sister. The real fun part was I remember that when that was news, it was actually perceived as the other way around. Michael Bay was the brother-in-law of Leonard Nimoy. I mean, that was the junior senior part of that relationship there. So of course, years have gone by, audiences have changed, we've changed, But yeah, I remember that it was a big thing about him being in the family. Thank you so much about the interview on Tree Lane, ZX. I will definitely check that out. I'm curious, ZX, where the letter ZX come from. If we get a chance, you can put it at the bottom. I'd be tickled to know, because it's. I immediately jumped to the ZX Spectrum ZX81. For those of us that were involved in home computers back in the 1980s, so it's unusual to see somebody throw out ZX. And of course, I pronounce it ZX Spectrum and ZX81 because our brothers that live on the other side of the pond get upset if we mispronounce Z as Z instead of Z. But still, in my head, I have to run the English as a second language translator to come out with the word Z. I'll always think of it as ZX, so I apologize if I ever trip up unintentionally on that. replicating that coat was going to be costly. You're absolutely right. Yes, that coat was going to be something else. Another thing that several fans have asked me about, and I have not been able to find out any information of because it's such an unusual prop. Star Trek was one of the cheapest productions that you could have. When I say cheap, I'm not talking about expense-wise. It was one of the most expensive television series that's ever made at the time, probably the most expensive in the 1960s. But that meant that they had no money. They were constantly running out of money. So if there was a way to do things inexpensively, they would do it. There is a prop hanging on above the mantle of a fireplace in the set that is the head of an alligator, whereas you would normally expect to see like maybe the head of a deer. Yes, you can see it right there in that picture. How is that I even... The timing's almost right. It's at the top of that screen. There's no way that they built that prop for this episode because it makes no sense, doesn't fit the storyline. But that means that Desilu had this prop in its property stores at some point, which means it's probably shown up somewhere else. But we've been unable to track down any other show that actually used that prop. So if anybody's out there listening to this within the sound of my voice, there's a much better shot of it right there. Drop me a line. I'd love to actually go out. If you can tell me the show, I have no problem going out and digging through footage to try to get it. It's just such an unusual prop that even now, 60 years later, we're wondering where it came from and where it went because it was so unusual. It's obvious they didn't, most likely, almost certainly did not build it for Star Trek. But then what in the world was it? It's just weird. Yeah, agreed. Yes, I do. Yeah, they mistreated that dog. The Enemy Within is the one you're thinking about, Alexandria, and it was. I did a video on the channel looking at bloopers and comments from The Enemy Within, and unfortunately, that dog was severely mistreated back then when they made that episode. It was the way that Hollywood works. It was not. I'm not picking on Star Trek or Gene or Bob Justman or anybody for how they did the scenes. That is just the way that network television worked. But in order to make sure that it was blatantly obvious that you had a good doggy and a bad doggy, the good doggy video footage was shot after sedating the dog. And the bad doggy footage was shot after starving the dog. I hate to use the word starving, but it really is that. But basically, they deprived him of food for at least one day and then poked him and prodded him with a stick to get him ticked off in order for him to appear vicious in the clip. But yes, it is one of Star Trek's um, least least successful attempts at trying to make something look human. There's that scene. Are you challenging me to a duel? Yeah. Don't forget the cute horn. Yeah, that's right. It had the unicorn horn. Stephen King has an issue with endings. He kind of peters out. Yeah, and ironically, that results in one of his real issues that he has with what do you call it? With the TV show, with the movies. He, in general, is very negative to the movie adaptations of his books. Famously, he despises The Shining, which most of us recognize as a classic of modern horror. He despises The Shining, and part of the reason the ending is completely different than the ending he wrote. Okay, Kubrick knew that the ending that he had written would not play well with the way that Kubrick had laid out the movie. So he didn't like that. Salem's Lot ended, but not quite the way he wanted it to. The Mist he had issues with. Um, and it's basically because they change his endings to try to provide greater closure. And when they do that, like a lot of people, like the professional writers did in the first season of Star Trek, that's an unusual photo of Kirk, isn't it? What a facial expression! I don't think I've ever seen that kind of facial expression on Shatner before. So when you ghostwrite somebody, they bristle, and I think he does that. But he prefers everything that's been done on television. So I mentioned Salem's Lot. I meant that incorrectly. Obviously, Salem's Lot was made for TV, and The Stand. But even The Shining was remade for TV, and it did feature the original ending. And if you haven't had a chance to see it, it's well worth watching just to be able to complete it. And then you're going to compare it with the original, and you're going to see the emotional threads that are carried forward. The ending is in The Shining, in the TV version, is much more emotional and impactful and satisfying than the final scene of Jack frozen in the snow in Maze. Yeah, since I stopped reading King after Misery, I had a problem with Misery. I really everybody loved it. Everybody loved the movie. Everybody loved the book. I read the book. I read all of Stephen King's books when they come out. Um, Not one of my favorites, which is really strange. The idea of somebody writing a story and then having a fan interact with them in a non-positive way. It was told better in Secret Window, which I believe was based on his short story, and it was told better in The Dark Half that he did, with very strong allegations, very strong allegories between the reality of what happened with him and his Richard Bachman's persona when it came clean that Richard Bachman was Stephen King. The Dark Half covers that exact same story as well, and I think it does a better job than Misery does. It's just, I do have to admit that, what's her name? I can't remember her name right now, but, the actress, she really nailed Maniacal. The same way that Jack Nicholson nailed Maniacal in The Shining. She absolutely owned it in Misery. And probably Kathy Bates, I think it is, probably sealed her career with that one. But overall, not one of my favorite stories about authors getting their comeuppance. Bag of Bones is another one I think he wrote. He writes a lot about that, I guess. ZX, by the way, I misunderstood that. I thought we'd be watching it here next time. No, by all means, actually, ZX or ZX, that's perfectly fine. The reason we're not watching it here is kind of strange because you're probably used to people doing what are called reaction videos. And in reaction videos, they can actually show you the video of the things that they're talking about. They can show you a full episode of Star Trek and do a mystery science theater kind of approach at the bottom of the screen. And you would not, if Paramount tried to claim copyright against you, you could argue that it's fair use. The problem with that kind of situation is I can do a reaction video, but Star Trek is available for broadcast. So you are not allowed legally to rebroadcast TV on YouTube. They literally just block the video. They're right in the middle of whatever you're doing. Out comes the plug. You can no longer see this video. So it put us up with a challenge on how to do a watch party. Some of the other channels I follow, like the Magnificent Grim Life Collective, they just literally just tell you, open it up in another machine and watch it over there, and we're going to do a normal live stream box, full screen live stream box. And then you spend all of your time interacting with them the way we're doing it right now. and then, as well as comments coming from the viewers and themselves, or things they just happen to notice as they're watching the screen. Oh, look at the gallows snooze behind Kirk. Another absolutely extraordinary example of Finnerman's cinematography. Just mind blowing. So watch parties are a little bit weird with that, and so that's why I don't do that. Unfortunately, this screenshot every 15-second things is my compromise, because for the longest time I couldn't figure out a way to do any of it. So I just literally would reference, hey, start it over there in that device. We'll talk about it and watch it over there, and we'll talk to you over here separately. It was Manley that gave me the idea, because at one point Manley made a comment in one of our watch parties that, oh, I just watched the episode from memory because I'm here mainly to interact with everybody else, and I know the episode good enough. And that's what got me thinking. It's like, well, wow, he's right. We do remember the episode enough. So maybe that would be acceptable for a lot of people who join the episode to literally just show a slideshow as we go through to spark our conversations. And so that's how I ended up displaying it the way that you see here. CX was me trying not to use my first name. My first YouTube channel is under. Okay, cool. Can you use Z as Z2? It's a good question. I would assume they might. I mean, obviously, Canada gets most of its English roots from the French Canadians and Britain, because I think the Queen, the King now. But maybe somebody will chime in there. But I wouldn't be surprised if they do use. No, I'd be surprised if they do it the other way around. I think maybe they might actually use Z instead of Z. But that's a really good question. Maybe somebody will chime in on there. Trailane's coat was sold at auction. That's one of the things I'm getting ready to do. I've been doing it forever. I've been buying the auction catalogs for all these auctions, because there's some sources of some absolutely amazing photographs of, obviously, props and costumes and stuff that aren't readily available anywhere else. And then sometimes they just give us, like when Greg Jean passed on, his auction included hundreds, it looks like, of photographs, publicity still, and one-of-a-kind photographs that were taken behind the scenes at Star Trek at the various different productions that I had never seen before. And they were all completely reproduced in the auction catalog. So you can page through the auction catalog and see them, which means they can be scanned, cropped, and put up online. So they're a great source of imagery that you may not have ever seen before. So I assume, Z, that you're talking about the dog. Because I know that you're right. I mean, a lot of the creature effects in Star Trek made their appearances on different TV shows at the time. I just recently did a small package video from a longer one that I'd done a while back, where Janos Prohaska, I show you where, the Horta, the Mugado, the gorilla creature, and the bird creature from the cage, where they all had originally been used in the Outer Limits, and then went to Star Trek. And like in the case of the Mugado, it went on from the same time that it was in Star Trek. It was also in, I think, 2 different episodes of Lost in Space. It showed up on Bewitched, and it finally showed up on a TV show called crap, I don't remember. It's About Time, I think. It was a Sherwood Schwartz Gilligan's Island type of adventure about astronauts to get thrown back into the past. A lot of those creature effects. Star Trek was just a client, and the product roamed from show to show. Absolutely true, Alexandria. They do. what it was put through makes us cringe today, but it was not formally tortured, or it didn't result in, unless the dog ended up with permanently antisocial behavior, we don't know whether it resulted in any long term. So, Manly Google Star Trek Tree Lane's jacket. Should bring up a photograph on that. I bet you it might have actually been sold in the William Ware Tice collection. I have a catalog of that over in the corner, which he wrestled. He auctioned off almost all of his stuff. Secret Windows seemed a rewrite of The Dark Half. Another problem with King. Yes. Yep, it did. Thank you, Z. You're right. Yes, and I can tell you that I actually, on this channel, I've been burned more than once. Around this time last year, I started putting forth a whole bunch of behind-the-scenes videos that people hadn't seen in years. Now, it's not like they're not out there. They are out there, okay? You can find everything that I've stumbled across. But I was finding them and collecting them into this big data, this library of videos. And I put them on the channel. And I got, as The Rock would say, they put the smackdown hard on me in November of last year. They stripped the channel of monetization and limited the channel. And their basic response was, how dare you? They don't like it when you air other people footage that you did not create. And so I've been using, since then, and the channel has recovered. Since then, I have been using the same footage, but slowly weaving it into videos about the topic of the footage, so that it doesn't get struck down. Because CBS and Paramount are known for issuing strikes and striking your videos down, no questions asked. And when it happens, you have to file an appeal. And at the end of that 30-day process, they may still go, no, we don't care what you say, and still keep the ban in place. So you try not to antagonize them. If it goes as far as them actually giving you an honest-to-God strike, where they file a formal complaint versus just simply saying no via the content system, after 3 formal complaints, you are banned from YouTube and all of your channels. They determine that you're associated with other channels. They've lost the ability to be on YouTube. So they can literally, for small channels like this that generate a modest income that allows me to buy behind-the-scenes books and to go to like Wonderfest or to go to Star Trek conventions and to get information that I then in turn give back to you. That's all paid for by the channel, by the little bit of advertising money and patron money that I get on the channel. And they have the ability to completely remove that overnight. And not pleasant. So yeah, they can be really, really heavy-handed with it. We lost so many good fan videos because of copyright. As a citizen of both the U.S. and Canada, Z or Z both work for me. Apparently, Z is what's used, but okay. That doesn't surprise me. That's what I thought, although I'd said it backwards. Okay, it's Trillion's coat that we're talking about that appeared on. Yep. So that's that. What do you call it? That's that shared wardrobe area that we've heard so much about. Like, obviously, a lot of the bread and circuses, any of the period pieces, the Nazi uniforms, stuff like that, obviously just came literally from the wardrobe department. And then, of course, there were some modifications made occasionally. The video, I have to apologize. The video is obviously a little bit off in timing. We've been on 1 hour and 9 minutes, which means we are about 5 minutes short of. We're not off. It's not off. Never mind. I guess had a brain freeze. We start the video at 15 minutes after the video. The episode runs for. That's the issue. The episode runs for an hour. The episode was supposed to run for 52 minutes. So what I've done is I laid it out to be exactly an hour long, and in doing so, I stretched it by about 7 minutes. So we would have been done right about now originally. It looks like we got about another 5 or 7 minutes to go. For those of you who feel like you've got to bail, I understand completely. I really do try to keep these things confined to just the hour time slot to keep it everybody family friendly, for lack of a better word. But for those of you who do decide to hang on, looks like we got about another 5.5 minutes before we reach the end. I love it when Trelane's parents show up to speak of the devil. The same idea also, we haven't really talked too much about this, but I mean, it's the same idea, I guess, that, Charlie X, he's obviously human, but they gave him a race very similar to Trelane's and Q's, gave him abilities, some of the abilities that they had. So we saw that there. And then you got the whole the Gorgon, the friendly angel from And the Children Shall Lead, which is yet another one where a extremely powerful, almost godlike race shows up and manipulates the young, or at the very least interacts with our viewing experience via the young. Yep. Oh, Mom, do I gotta come back in now? I remember that face. That was when you were in the front yard and the street lights hadn't really come on yet. Like, really, Mom? You said I could stay out till the lights came on. Those were the days. Yeah, that's Mom saying, nope, haul your butt in here right now. Yeah, those were the days. We'd go out in the morning on a weekend, on a Saturday morning, and disappear. We wouldn't be back until the sun came down. Our parents weren't worried about us. They had no idea where we were. The ending here, as that brings up, the ending here is so reminiscent of a Twilight Zone episode. Yes, it is. Another TV series that's amazing. I love the Twilight Zone. Hard to believe you go all the way back to 1959 for some of the earliest stuff. Well, we're going to be wrapping up into the credits within the next few minutes, so I'm going to get ready to wind this down. I did want to point out, too, I want to thank everybody who joined us today, especially those of you that I have interacted with for the first time today, Alexandria and Z from another Canadian friend that we have. I want to thank you very much for not only showing up and listening to an old man ramble, but you were very, very much part of the show. And I appreciate that, because the best part I have in all of this is talking to you. I love finding out new things about Star Trek when I do my research. I love stumbling across things that I thought were right that I can prove wrong and otherwise. But at the end of the day, what we just did for the past hour is the reason I still continue to do the channel. And I feel so sorry when I hear people quitting YouTube because they start on a channel like this, and the beginning of their channel is this. It's this interaction, and then they grow. You get successful, and then at some point, you cease becoming a content creator, and instead you become a businessman, and you do it for money. I don't ever want to do that with this channel, because then what happens is the moment that happens, you get less and less joy from it. And in my opinion, that means you impart less and less joy and value to your viewers. Until finally, after a year or two or more of, not knowing why you're unhappy with YouTube, you quit. If you go back and you look at YouTube channels within the past year, right after January, a whole slew of people quit for that exact same reason. This channel will never be my primary source of income. I don't expect it to be. It is a retirement mad money project. Give me the money as long as the channel brings in the money to go to Star Trek conventions and to buy things to talk to you guys about, it's going to be here. I have no desire to make anything bigger because I don't want to invest that time into it. I don't want another job. So I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to echo Underdog here. Thank you for another wonderful and engaging watch party, all. For those of you who are following along And I caught it. Underdog is Roger. Roger normally joins me here, but Roger's been under the weather. So I hope that he recovers well for next time. We'll see. And other than that, I think that's going to be it. I'm going to let the live stream continue for the next minute or so, just so that I can say that all the screenshots came up. And then I'm going to go ahead and close it out there. Thank you so much, everybody. Once again, I've had a wonderful time. It has been fun for me as well, my friend. God bless all of you. And I look forward to seeing you again on our next watch party in 2 weeks. And then, of course, in the videos that you're going to be seeing from me that are coming out each week now as we move forward. So until then, everybody, thank you very much for the time that you spent with us this afternoon. Have a wonderful evening and weekend. And I'll talk to you again in the future. Take care, guys.